trends to watch as part of our third annual Fraud Month. Just before we get started, some quick housekeeping pointers. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to put them in the widget on the right-hand side of your screen. Type those questions into us. We will try and get to them throughout the session, and definitely have some time at the end to answer any of your questions that you might have. The webinar is also be available on our website later on at arccorp.com. Note that we have 2 additional webinars coming up next week, so do feel free to sign up for those as well. There'll be some insightful sessions, both one from the NCFTA and also the from WorldPay. So do sign up for that. Also, feel free to follow us via LinkedIn on ARC Prevents Fraud. Of course, hashtag ARC Prevents Fraud there. On the next slide, we have a promotion to get put forward by Perseuss, who partnered with us in developing the ARC Risk Check. So do feel free to check it out at arccorp.com/arc-risk-check, and you can find registration there for yourself and for your teams. There's also an API option available there for you. This is a free offering up until the end of the year, so do feel free and use this time to sign up for it and take advantage of it for the rest of the year. But for now, yeah, let's get this webinar going, and allow me to introduce myself. I'm Cornelius Hutting, the Director of Revenue Integrity, and hosting with me today is a gentleman who needs little to no introduction, Doug Nass, and our guest presenters, Maarten Alleman, CEO, and Wouter Opheij, aka Mr. W, Head of Product Development at Perseuss. Wouter, over to you, or rather, Mr. W, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cornelius, and thanks for the nice introduction. Today we will be happy to talk a little bit about ourselves, but as we are partnering up, or did partner up with ARC, we are very happy to present again, I think already the 3rd time in a couple of months. And as Cornelius just shared with us today, I will share Perseuss insights on fraud and associated numbers, trends and information during this ongoing pandemic. We will start today with a brief introduction of our company first, followed by the promised insights, obviously, of our fraud data, as well a brief explanation how to use the ARC and Perseuss tool, the ARC Risk Check, and obviously how to access it and start your free trial. I guess that at the end of this webinar, there will be enough time to answer some of your questions. And also Maarten will be happy to answer all of those. So as a company that helps the travel industry already for more than 12 years, we are continuously looking for new methods to help travel merchants fight fraud and obviously related costs. At this moment in time, it is important to provide travel merchants with an option to check their suspicious transactions for fraud, preventing travel agents from fraud costs in already very difficult times. But let me first explain some about Perseuss, our company. Perseuss is a global database of fraud with over 140 merchants, helping the travel industry combat fraud for already more than 12 years now. Well, back in the days, cooperation in fraud amongst merchants was basically like sharing their individual fraud information, like chargeback data, in Excel sheets amongst each other. However, and as you can imagine, all data sharing participants realized this was not a very secure and scalable method. So soon merchants started using the Perseuss platform, which over time evolved in a sophisticated platform where now hundreds of airlines and travel agents are uploading their fraud data. Our platform is filled with confirmed fraud data again, uploaded by our community members, which allows us to basically enrich merchants with additional information to, in the end, let them better decide if they are dealing with fraud, also with genuine customers, or if they need to investigate the booking in more detail before making a final decision. Our mission is to enable real-time access to cross-border fraud data, to community-based sharing between stakeholders in the commercial, the payments, and the fraud industry. By sharing data, merchants and banks can prevent the considerable costs related to fraud. Some of our products are Perseuss, which is used by the vast amount of airlines and travel agents and mostly used in an automated way via API. Other products are Fraud Chasers, our platform for fraud specialists to exchange knowledge and insights. And last but not least, again, we developed the ARC Risk Check for small and mid-sized travel agents to check suspicious incoming transactions. The Perseuss community members are from around the globe, as you can see, having coverage in all parts of the world. And at the moment, our fraud database exists out of 29 million negative data elements and 3.2 billion positive data elements. We process over 200 billion transactions per year, which helps us to improve our product massively. And finally, approximately 10,000 plus fraud uploads are added to our fraud database per week. So during this global pandemic, obviously the travel industry has been hit hard, very unfortunately. And some of you might have your own businesses today. Some of you work for travel agents, and others work for airlines. However, everyone in the industry has a need for some expectations, right? To make plans for the near, but also for the far future for your business. Well, as most of you know, many associations and organizations have tried to come up with some scenarios which should help you in planning your activities accordingly. Some of those organizations are the OECD, which provides more insights on the decline in the international tourism economy in 2020, which is basically the same what the WTO did. And of course, we have IATA, which provides numbers and futuristic insights on travel behavior. In this webinar, though, we will try to provide you with some of our own insights, deriving from our fraud database, as well insights from our conversations with members around the globe. Well, hopefully this will help you understand fraud better in these very uncertain times. So let's start with some statistics from Perseuss. Basically, the first trend is a very obvious one, but also a very important one to start with and to share with you. So the number of bookings. Obviously, we have identified a decrease in spring 2020, the moment the pandemic started. We also noticed a slow increase early summer due to the fact that borders reopened, for instance, in Europe and in Asia, and travel was an option again. So especially here in Europe, when I look into my own group of people I've contact with, quite some were able to travel and did. Some made the decision to not do that due to the social distancing and all the other measures. But it was an option, and hence we see an increase in the number of bookings, which also was obviously a trend that gave some hope to some of the travel merchants. However, unfortunately, this promising trend stopped towards the end of June and continued to decrease towards basically this moment in time. Well, as we all know, there's a lot of uncertainty about travel and trends in autumn 2020 and also the near and far future. And mainly that is because, as we can see here, the holiday period is over. And what happens right after, usually in September, is that business travel kicks off, which is obviously a very important moment in time to start, or at least stay at the same level of the bookings as the numbers were shown in the summer period. However, and that's probably this webinar is a very good example, a lot of businesses decided that business travel is not needed anymore because there are specific tools, webinars, and other methods to connect amongst each other. And obviously that business will have a hold or limitation of employees basically traveling for work. And last but not least are the possible new restrictions or closed borders due to a second wave of COVID-19. Unfortunately, but for instance, here in the Netherlands, where we are based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands has just been flagged as basically no-go areas for by our border countries, Belgium and Germany. And trends like this, scenarios like this will go on, and many scenarios like this will happen over time. So moving forward to basically the topic why we are here tonight. Let's zoom in and focus some more on fraud in the travel industry. As Perseuss is a fraud prevention company, receiving fraud data from our community members around the globe. Because of that, we are able to see and understand insights about fraud data, which we are obviously happy to share with you today. Well, as the number of bookings change, the number of fraud records increase and basically decrease as well. Compared to fairly high increase of bookings at the end of May, which was shown in the last slide, we also see less fraud in the same time frame. Basically, fraud was increasing, but less strong. But very important to know, let's emphasize that we see that fraud is still increasing, that fraudsters are still making attempts, and this could harm your business hard, as obviously sales levels are not close to your normal level. The conclusion here is that be very aware of fraudsters harming your business. And I guess, Doug, Cornelius, this is the same you see in the States, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we looked at not just the booking trends across our ARC data, of course, we see that in our normal processes, as we look at fraudulent transactions in the system and the use of our fraud alerts that we send out to the travel agency community, there's been a total drop in that, as you show here as well, sort of early mid-March, and obviously flatlined for most part throughout the rest of the year up to where we are now. Starting to see some growth, or a lot of rather spikes in fraud trends here in August, July, August, with a slowly but surely increase there of fraudulent transactions coming through the systems as well now. So, and these are mainly card not present transactions that are being flagged in our environment, and so that's ramping up. We ramp up there on the fraud. So to your point, is fraudsters are not they didn't go away. COVID didn't get them. So they are still out there. They are still scheming and planning and coming up with smart ideas as to how to defraud both the consumer and then obviously using vendors, merchants, etc. to defraud and or create harm and additional cost and so forth. That's just the way things are, and we need to be vigilant and be aware of it. And as markets come online more and more, those fraudsters are going to be opportunistic, and they're going to take advantage of it. So if it looks too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So if you get a big bookings in, be aware, check it out, do the due diligence, and go from there. But yeah, very much a similar trend. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. No, indeed. Similar to what we see, indeed. And obviously, key message here, be aware when suspicious bookings come in. So towards the next slide, this slide will explain some more about suspect ratios. Let me explain some more about what our system, the Perseuss system, identified as fraud. So first of all, what does suspect ratio basically mean? It means the number of risky transactions we scored in our system divided by the number of bookings. And as you see in this graph, having in mind the earlier graphs, the general trend of bookings and fraud numbers appear to be the same. However, if you take a closer look, the suspect rate and associated trends can be slightly different in terms of what we see is way more peaks and valleys. Basically, what this tells us, in our view, is that fraudsters remain active, as we've seen also in the previous slide, and they're trying to abuse good and bad situations, which we are in now, obviously. The risk of fraud is always around the corner, as we always say, but it's also not very predictable, especially in situations like this, which are way different than, let's say, a year ago. You can't really predict when fraud comes in, basically. When we talk about predictions and fraud, do you maybe have some insights about this, Doug or Cornelius?
Sorry, I was unmuted. I hope Doug's able to jump in here because unfortunately, the minute we started the webinar, he dropped off. Some technical issues, it seems there, but I think he said he's dialed in. But yeah, Doug, can you hear us? Are you available?
Oh, are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened here, but as soon as the webinar started, it kicked me out of the system. So sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, as we all know, we're living in some strange times, but as Cornelius mentioned, our fraudsters are returning to the system as soon as basically global travel ended. You know, middle of March, late March, April, May. It wasn't until really about late June that some of our old fraudsters started to return, and you know, they're not doing it at the volume that they used to, but as long as they have customers that are willing to travel, they're going to be out there trying to find somebody to manipulate, either online through a social engineering scheme somehow. You know, they want to make money as well, and so we are seeing them slowly return to the ARC system as well.
And we see new, or rather an increase in fraud that used to be not necessarily for the travel environment, and that's ransomware. I think in the last 2 or 3 months, we've had 4 major agencies hit with ransomware in the value of millions and millions of dollars that they had to pay out for that. So the fraudsters are definitely, you know, redirecting their focus, and they are coming up with new ideas and new ways to affect the industry.
Thanks. Yeah, wrapping basically those statistics off is what we also did is basically a year-over-year comparison. So 29 versus 2020. Which includes, again, the bookings, the fraud data, and the suspect ratio. So again, let's start with bookings again. Obviously, some good numbers first, but then after a high decrease due to the pandemic, very obviously, and a start of the recovery, and then it slows down again, basically. Next is the confirmed fraud. So the number of fraud cases by our community members into our platform, which shows almost the same trend. and unfortunate recovery of fraud, which emphasizes fraud is still happening again, and is relatively as large as in the normal situation. So what we see, less bookings come in, there's also less fraud, obviously, but it also grows over time and also can maybe harm your business even harder because sales volumes are lower than you expected and anticipated on at the beginning of this year. And obviously the last line here, which is about the suspect rate, which again in this scenario tells it is changing a lot and is not predictable, which should make you aware of fraudsters at all time. As we take some more a more detailed look at the graph, we see that the decrease of the suspect rate was higher than the bookings and fraud rate. However, in midsummer, the fraud rate was the lowest and not anymore the suspect rate. And we tried to come up with some ideas here. How could this be? Also with Doug and Cornelius and Maarten. Maybe a reason is that access to credit cards maybe is less throughout the pandemic. Maybe some other insights, or maybe confirm this rationale behind what we see here, guys.
Yeah, we think. I mean, again, this is this is our own thinking here, and just looking at the data and doing some analytics, but. We guessing here that this could be because of limited access to credit. Also, people are a little bit more aware of how they spend, and also in turn protecting their credentials, protecting those sensitive card credentials, etc. It could also be that people maybe got rid of their credit cards because they see it as a risk to themselves. Or maybe they couldn't pay those credit cards anymore, and the banks took away that privilege. So there's a couple of factors there that could be cited here, but again, it's an interesting change, an interesting shift.
Yeah, indeed. So this is one of our insights, but also our view on what might be the reason. Feel free to share some of your own insights for all attendees. What you think this could be, and we're happy to start a dialogue later.
Yeah, feel free to type in the question section. What do you think what could have triggered this? We're happy to hear from the audience as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it'll be helpful.
Definitely. So next, some of the stats and trends on fraud associated to our fraud data. We also prepared some global fraud trends for you. Basically, the upcoming analysis is based on shared fraud data of a representative group of merchants around the globe, which is good for you to understand. And let's start with the Americas. So obviously, as many of you are aware, maybe are not yet aware, but I think there's a lot of insightful information on all ARC platforms. Usually we have a list of red flags, which basically indicates that some cases, for instance, or topics maybe, such as a ticket that is booked close to the departure date, or maybe a one-way ticket, raises basically red flags. Which basically means for you as a merchant, a travel agent, maybe an airline, you should raise a little bit more attention, which made sense. However, during this pandemic, a lot of changed, such as people that had to leave a country and hence only were able to book a one-way ticket, or people were not even able to book tickets a very long time in advance, so changed to booking tickets very close to the departure date. And those red flags that made a lot of sense in your current reviewing process maybe do not apply anymore. Maybe I will start with some of the insights here, and I think Doug is Mr. Red Flags. So explain a little bit. what red flags do you think apply still, and what red flags don't?
Yeah, thanks, Wouter. Yeah, we can definitely confirm that we at ARC have been seeing a lot of strange ticketing lately, a lot of last minute departures, one-way ticketing, as you mentioned, as countries are opening up and others are closing down, people are scrambling to try to get back to where they think, where they need to be. But of course, that leaves a trail for us that historically would be, very high risk. But when you start seeing families leaving from, Los Angeles to go back to Beijing, New York back to Rome, places like that, they are buying the last minute one-way tickets. They're cash and credit as well, but they set off all kinds of bells and whistles. But in these crazy times, probably the best thing to say is you really need to know your customer if you're willing to do some of these more expensive last minute charges for them. If your risk appetite allows it, maybe open it up a little bit more to new customers, but know for a fact that fraudsters are operating out there. They're going to be using this type of thing, especially in social engineering schemes, where they're emailing and calling agencies claiming that they've got to repatriate people. This is a perfect opportunity for them to use that type of cover to get their fraudulent customers through.
Indeed. So basically, I think your point is here that some of the red flags don't apply anymore. There's a lot of changes in booking behavior, but unfortunately, the fraudsters are obviously aware of those changes in booking behavior. So they try to abuse this, right?
Yeah, so I think we get a lot of false positives based on the old rules, old red flags. You are going to see a lot of false positives. You're going to take those through to manual review and find out that they're actually a solid booking. I know a lot of our fraud alerts go out and based on some of these trends, and they come back as saying, oh, it's a positive booking. So there's a lot of validation being done, but continue doing that validation as someone who's taking that booking for sure.
Indeed, something we hear back from our community as well. So in terms of this slide, to confirm what we just raised, so we found that there's indeed an average drop of 43% when looking into people that book tickets 2 weeks or less in advance compared to last year, which means that the so-called red flags, again, for fraud do not apply in this moment of time anymore. Also, we found a proportional increase of 11% in number of one-way versus return tickets defrauded, which we also raised just a minute ago. And finally, some of the most hottest fraud routes remain to and from Colombia and Venezuela since March 2020. This is something ARC can confirm. Or maybe there's other routes that appear to be very hot as a fraud route.
Yeah, and I was waiting for Doug to jump in there, but we do see some shifts, obviously, as other markets are opening up, and I think we're going to touch on that shortly. But you do see a shift, especially when it's domestic versus international. There's definitely changes in trends there. But then, of course, you also see that evolution as markets are coming online and opening up. But of course, it's a stop-start sort of scenario. But you do see the trends shifting from what they were historically. But it somehow still remain the same markets remain to be red flags. It's just the volume is shifting a little bit. But yeah, the markets where we know fraud normally happens, those hotspots, they're still relevant, but they do shift around a bit more so than they used to. And there's a few new ones coming online, but I think we'll touch on them as we go through Europe and Asia on the next slides.
All right. So let's zoom in towards Europe. some interesting insights to share are the following here. So the top 5 IP countries associated with fraud in Europe since March 2020 are France, the United Kingdom, United States, Netherlands, as well as Spain. And what we identified as the hottest fraud routes here since March 2020 are the routes from Athens to Munich or Frankfurt, Lisbon to Madrid, Paris to Marrakesh or Milan, and also Brussels to Casablanca, which are some of our insights. And maybe for all attendees, a sneak preview towards the ARC risk check. Well, using basically a tool that can help you identify fraud, checking suspicious transactions means you have to check some of your key data elements that are associated to the transaction. An IP address is not always mandatory, or actually is not mandatory and not always needed for you as a travel agent to be able to check suspicious transactions. So the main data elements we score on are the person name, the phone number, email address, but also the IP address, which can add value in scoring and generating insights associated to suspicious transactions.
Hey, Wouter, this is Doug.
Yeah.
I've been talking to some other people in the industry. They've in some ways discounted the IP address review. Maybe 10 years ago, it was a lot more important than it is nowadays. Can you discuss, why that would be not such an, or it's not as seen as such a valuable data point as it was so many years ago?
So can I answer?
Yes.
Yeah, they are correct. The IP address is less relevant than it was in the past. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that a lot of the providers are no longer giving out IP addresses to domestic internet connections that are always the same. So they're changing quite a lot. Second is that most of the fraudsters know to use either a public proxy or the Tor network to do their bookings. And third is that because of all the botnets, you can see a lot of abuse of normal IP addresses for normal customers, where the traffic is routed through their IP address. So it's definitely not if it's just an IP address, it will never be a red flag, but it can be a very good indication on what is happening when you see a lot of bookings coming from one IP address that are just that really don't make sense. And that's one of the things that we can see within our platform, because we have a very wide view on all bookings that are coming in. So we see sometimes IP addresses coming in where we think, hey, this is not a travel agent, but they're doing a lot of bookings. There's a lot of velocity in the bookings that they do. This could be risky.
Thanks, Maarten. Thanks, Maarten. Definitely. So also, this sounds like the insights we also received from our data scientists at Perseuss. So indeed, IP address became less relevant, but definitely can be relevant when checking for suspicious transactions. Thanks. Final slide here about Asia Pacific. So also we found here a decrease in days to departure since March 2020, making it harder to predict fraud based on current fraud prediction models. Same like in the US, an increase in number of one-way versus return tickets defrauded. And here the top 5 IP countries associated with fraud since March are New Zealand, the United States, Australia, Argentina, and India. And also we found fairly obvious, but a temporary disappearance of known hot fraud routes to and from China, basically due to the lockdown, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So Wouter, just to add to that, I mean, from our data, we've got a heat map for airports, high-risk airports, and we also see Manila standing out, and also Pakistan coming online there. So another two markets there that, from our data at least, shows concerns.
Thanks. So I already skipped to the next slide, and what I want to share here with you is basically, besides the data we have in our platform and the insights I just shared with you, we obviously also have a lot of contact with all our community members around the globe. And we would like to share some of the insights we have during our conversations with them as well with you. Some of those are more obvious than others, but still worth mentioning that everyone should be aware of the fraud attacks that can be coming in and are around the corner. So as we have seen before, there's ongoing fraud. Also after the pandemic outbreak, maybe the numbers are less, but relatively they stay almost the same. Well, basically when fraudsters are able to fly, they will fly. They face the same travel limitations due to the lockdowns, but they fly again whenever possible.
And I mean, in addition to having the fraudsters flying, I think they definitely have gone in hibernation during the COVID period. I mean, we mentioned that earlier when we saw that flat line, especially on our fraud data. But we know from other conversations that we've had, and Doug can expand a little bit here about the dark web discussions we've been having, that these guys are definitely out there planning, scheming, working on other ways to defraud. So they're just buying their time, and of course they want to make a return, and also start making money again. I mean, COVID has hit them hard as well as any other business. I mean, fraud is but a business. So these guys are definitely waiting in the wings and ready to take advantage, as things start loosening up.
Yeah, thanks, Gurnis. I'd like to add, the chatter on the dark web, from what we've talked with other people, the fraudsters that have been targeting the airline and hotel industry, it was called out that they were specifically taking the hardest hits because no one was really traveling, so they couldn't sell their product. But in the meantime, what we've got to also be aware of is the hackers, the ones that are attacking systems and stealing card credentials and things like that they sell to other criminals. That activity still continues. So when things start to really shake loose, hopefully here in the next few months, all those criminals are ready to pounce, and they're ready to start to they got to monetize, the hackers got to monetize all of the stolen credit card data that they've sold or that they've hacked, and they sell it off to the other criminals who use them. So we are really concerned that once things open up, that the fraud will really shoot up a lot. So we just need to all be collectively aware of that and prepare for it.
Yeah, and besides that, also obviously taking into consideration that probably current methods to check suspicious transactions don't apply anymore. Some other trends are popping up, which makes it obviously very difficult in the near future, right? So also a problem we are hearing from our community members, a lot of airlines, but also the travel agents, is that there's a lack of human resources in their manual review, where there were some dedicated teams before, or maybe a dedicated person as a travel agent. They have lack of human resources, which makes it way harder to be focused on the manual review, to actually manual review all these suspicious transactions. And therefore, they're happy to have some tools in place to make their processes more effective.
Wouter, if we can just pause there for a second before we go on to those other bullets. We just got a question in that I think is going to be very relevant to where we're going to next. Yeah. So let me just read that out real quickly, and thank you for sending that in. The question is there any data regarding ratio between real fraud, confirmed fraud, cases to friendly fraud, as large number of cardholders are reporting their tickets they've booked as fraud in order to speed up the recovery of those funds? And I think that leads us into those the final 2 points there about chargebacks, refunds, and double refunds. Things might have looked and slowed down or seem to have calmed down from a chargeback perspective, but we do know now that with the refunds coming through from the airlines, again, this is a shift because of the policy changes. Historically, the airlines were either going to issue vouchers, they're going to do future travel. Very few airlines out of the gates and said we're going to refund. Of course, that's for self-preservation and for cash flow reasons, etc. That they needed to make those decisions. So, but now, as things are changing and airlines are, getting support from governments, etc., they are now triggering those refunds from going through, and now we sort of start seeing, a shift a little bit as well in the chargeback world from what used to be a true fraudulent a coded chargeback is now actually maybe a potential friendly fraud chargeback, and then coupled to that, you now also see another refund issued by the airline, and suddenly that customer who already triggered that chargeback back in March, now in August is getting a refund from the airline. And now, because the travel agency is potentially stuck in the middle, on top of that, they might be running into a debit memo as well. So a lot of communication is needed during this process. People need to be vigilant. Merchants need to be aware of this. Everybody is being caught up in a rapid change, rapid policy changes, business changes, etc. And we need to all keep up on that, those changes, and be communicate. And I think we heard that yesterday on our webinar with Chargebacks 911 and Priceline. It's essential that to avoid some of this, you need to communicate. You need to have open communication with both the merchant, the airline, and ultimately the customer. Because if you can control your customer, maintain that open discussion with them, keep them informed, and sort of work with them to prevent a chargeback, because you are in contact with the airline and there's potential for a refund coming. Have that conversation and manage those expectations.
Interesting. Any other maybe insights from people we spoke to in our community network? Doug, Nes, maybe Maarten, Cornelius?
Also, we've got a very short list of questions in at the moment. So please, we are at the sort of the 45-minute mark here. We would love to get some questions in so we can spend the next 10 to 15 minutes answering those questions. So please send any questions in. We'll try and answer them. Even if you think they're not relevant to this discussion, type them in. We might be able to answer them, but or at least get back to you at some other point with a response as we do some investigation around that. But yeah, there's a good opportunity now for questions to come in. And but yeah, Maarten, Doug, if you want to add anything else here, it's probably a good spot for that.
Hey, it's Doug. someone might be wondering why in the tool credit cards are not scored. And one of the things I always like to say is the shelf life of a compromised credit card that are being used throughout the industry, that shelf life is usually pretty short. Sometimes it's only open a few hours, a day or two, then it's completely gone. Meaning a red flag is going to be hitting at the financial institution that will halt any further transactions. So many people now get text alerts from their bank whenever charges are made on their card, and they're able to immediately contact the bank to say, hey, I didn't authorize that. Historically, I would say the longest bad compromised credit card that I've ever seen was used in a domestic scheme, and I could trace it was used for a stunning 3 weeks before it got shut down. That was many years ago, but 3 weeks is the longest time that I've ever seen a single individual account being used. Maarten, Wouter, is there anything you want to add on to as to why why the tool doesn't look at the credit card?
So,
Well,
go ahead, Maarten. I just forward already to this slide, but go ahead.
Yeah, so Doug, you're right. Credit cards they have a really short shelf life, and basically because it's so easy and so cheap to find stolen credit card details on the dark web, that it really doesn't make sense for the fraudster to try to use a credit card too long. That's one. And two, by the time that the credit card is actually has been discovered as fraudulent, the credit card company themselves will already take actions on that credit card. So it's not really very useful for us to do it. And the third thing is that more and more travel agents and airlines don't even have access to the credit card numbers because they're all hashed in systems because of PCI compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they tokenize, right? So, yeah. So we got one question in here, which we'll try and answer. So the question is, and I think this is more of an our question, and I'll try and get it. But we put in a request for refunds back in March and never heard anything until this past month. The airlines have been processing the refund. If the client did a charge back in March, who is responsible for the ticket being refunded now? So ultimately, I would say, if you are aware of the passenger, John Smith, receiving a refund from the airlines, they've done a chargeback, I'd say contact your customer and ask them to reverse that chargeback and accept the charge, because they are getting that money back. So again, you need to have a dialogue with your customer and see what you can do there to prevent that from coming back to you. I don't know if anybody has any other advice around that.
Not here. No.
Okay. We have another question here. Do you have any insight, and this goes back to the 5 regions we looked at around fraud, on what the average price or the set price of the tickets are for those 5 regions, top 5 regions you mentioned earlier, Wouter?
To be very fair, I think this is specifically a question that we can look up and answer after and share with everyone. This is not the data that I have at my disposal at the moment of time, to be very honest.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair enough. Still happy to get more questions in, so feel free to start typing and get us your questions through. We'll probably be a few more minutes if we don't get any more questions in, but we're here to ability to ask away.
Yeah, and allow me to take this moment to explain obviously about the ARC risk check that we developed together with ARC, which is free of use till the end of 2020 to prepare for all travel agents when suspicious bookings are coming in, prevent yourself of fraud that's harming your business in this already difficult times. The process is basically very easy. It's very easy to enroll. The prices afterwards are way more focused on small, mid-sized travel agents. However, this is a manual way of performing checks on suspicious transactions. We do have the option to also automate this via an API. Same like we work with the larger online travel agents and airlines. Obviously, for the ARC risk check, you tap into the same amount of fraud data as the larger airlines and online travel agents do. And in the ARC risk check, you have a very clear and transparent user interface and are able to find very well what all the scores mean, why did we score like we did after you did a search. So we happily invite you to try and prepare for the upcoming months.
Yeah, and you know, and if you are using the tool and you get stuck, you have the ability to reach out to the ARC team directly from the tool and check in with us to see if we've seen anything around a particular fraud that you might be suspicious of, or you get a score that sort of you know, that you can't really, or you're hesitant in making a decision on, you know, it's again something you can flag to us as well via the tool. So I got another question here. What happens if the airline refunds the ticket, but I would say make sure or validate with the airline whether or not they did the refund through the GDS and it went back that way, or whether or not they did a direct refund to the customer. If that is the case, then you need to you know, just engage with your airline that you see this on, and or double check with your GDS. Maybe if the airline did use the GDS, it takes a couple of hours or maybe a day or so for that to register. But if that timeline has passed, then I would check with your airline rep to figure out if that's been a direct refund, or if there's something going on at the GDS level. The agent will refund the ticket on the GDS, and we will have a double refund. Is that a debit memo risk? Yes, that could become a debit memo risk. Hence, again, you need to be in open communication with both your airline reps and your customers to try and avoid any of that. Okay, I'm seeing no more questions. Do we have any last closing thoughts from our guests and Doug? What sort of what would you say are the key takeaways here for today's session before we close out?
Yeah, so as we have seen the insights, the data, but also from the feedback from our community members, is obviously it's a very uncertain time. Differences in booking behavior, the number of bookings, and unfortunately lower sales volumes. Obviously, fraudsters are not sleeping. And trying to abuse this situation, even though the situation is way different. So try to prepare yourself for what can happen to prevent fraud, and simply be aware of what you can do. Try to think about maybe new methods, because some of the red flags that we discussed before do not apply anymore. Be aware and try to find as many possible tools, methods, and tactics for your organization that can help you in doing your business well.
Perfect, yeah. Anything, Maarten? Your last thoughts?
Well, I got a little bit triggered by the questions about the vouchers and the refunds.
Yeah.
There are a couple of initiatives that are working on ways to help both the airlines and the acquirers and the agents to communicate about issues like this, but they're not far enough yet to really launch. But there are several initiatives there, and I think especially when there's a second wave coming, there will be a necessity for that. And other than that, I think that Wouter already mentioned that during the whole COVID that we have now, we're very happy to, together with ARC, support the community by offering the tool the way we have it now for everybody to use. And let's hope that we get out of this the pandemic very fast and go back to normal business.
Yeah, I definitely second that. And yeah, thanks to Perseuss for extending that trial period for us. My closing words would just be vigilant, communicate, collaborate. I think the ARC Risk Check tool, both in its manual form and also the API form, both for the airlines and agents, is a perfect environment for collaboration, sharing information, sharing data of what you're seeing. It might be that you're the first one who gets hit. Unfortunately, you might be the one taking the hit, but you can use that information and knowledge and share it with the community and prevent that from happening. And down the line, you'd be a recipient from that data, from someone else's data as well. So it's really collaborative environment, sharing information and working together to prevent fraud. Doug, anything from you?
I would just add that if you see something, say something. Meaning, we at ARC at our stop fraud or stop fraud.com. At ARC.com, we want to hear when agents are approached by who they think is a fraudster. Those emails that we know have been circulating for the last 20 years. Let us know. Just forward those to us at stopfraud at arccorp.com. We really do look at them. They contain little pieces of intelligence that we use to build up our cases. We do try to go after these fraudsters. We've had success. There are people sitting in prison that have been attacking our industry. And we really rely on especially the agency community as our neighborhood watch. Fraudsters don't approach ARC; it's the agencies. So, if you see something, say something. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. W. and Maarten, for your participation. Doug, thanks for hosting with me. And our audience, thank you for participating. It was great, and I hope you've got some good takeaways here. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon and evening for you guys in the Netherlands.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.